TIL Democritus, 460 to 370 BCE, the ancient Greek philosopher, asked the question what is matter made of, and hypothesized that tangible matter is composed of tiny units that can be assembled and disassembled by various combinations. He called these units atoms. If I recall correctly, the word atom is derived from the Greek atomos, or without cutting. Obviously nuclear fission erased that notion, but for a guy who lived 2,500 years ago, that's incredibly forward-thinking stuff. Shits, like, super tiny. Democritus. To further clarify, it comes from a thought experiment. If you take something and cut it in half, then cut it in half again, and so on, can you get to a point where you can no longer cut it any further? Democritus posited that you would get to a point that you could not cut it any further. He called this atomus, literally I cannot cut, though translated as indivisible. Anglicized into atoms. And Aristotle said no, you moron, all matter is made of the four elements earth, water, fire, and air, of course. In doing so, he became the first avatar and hindered scientific progress for approximately 2,000 years. You can never believe what atoms tell you. They make up everything. Damn, lived to be 92. Ramses II is the only other ancient historical figure I can think of that lived that long. Augustus was seen as old as hell when he died and he was only 75. And here we are, me just heard a woman on the radio not wanting a COVID-19 vaccine, because it could contain heavy metals like aluminum. My favorite quote from him is "A life without festivities is a long road without an inn." He was known as the laughing philosopher. Would have guessed he founded the principles of democracy for some reason. Oh well. If this guy could think that 2,400 years ago, imagine what people today would be able to think if they just stopped shitposting on Twitter for an hour. First rule of academia: there is nothing you can discover on your own that an ancient Greek didn't discover 2,500 years ago. I love Democritus. Philosophy, ancient theoretical physics. Tom means to cut. Think surgical terms like mastectomy. A is a negation. So atom means uncuttable. As in the basic building blocks. We now know this isn't true. But still fun etymological fact. Edit, etymological, not epistemological. I wonder how much of that comes from Egypt. I think he visited there as a child, and Egyptians already had a decent understanding of the existence of atoms at the time. A similar hypothesis to Democritus's own. I'm surprised no one has mentioned Kanada, an ancient Indian philosopher and natural scientist who also theorized the concept of Anu and Parmanu, atom, molecules. https://en. Wikipedia, org/wiki/Kanada_/, philosopher / #the _concept _of_Anu _atom /. He also called them atoms from the Greek word for unbreakable, I think, and his theory was that they are the smallest thing existing. They're not. I feel like there were so many ancient Greek philosophers spouting out bullshit that the ones we hear about today are just the ones who happen to be right about their bullshit. Edit, I'm not saying that Democritus wasn't a smart guy or was spouting bullshit or anything. I'm just saying that it certainly feels like Greek philosophers spouted a lot of bullshit, which is pretty undeniable. We talk a lot about the philosophers who were right or at least inspirational in forming a basis of science. But we rarely discuss the batshit crazy philosophers like the guy who said humans were birds without feathers. This leads to it being hard to decipher from the philosophers who had good basis for being right from those who were just spouting bullshit and happened to be lucky about being right. Thanks. How did he live to be 90 years old in that time period? Enough philosophers in one place are like monkeys with typewriters. The linked article says it pretty well. Their speculation on atoms, taken from Leucippus, bears a passing and partial resemblance to the 19th century understanding of atomic structure that has led some to regard Democritus as more of a scientist than other Greek philosophers. However, their ideas rested on very different bases. One smart motherfucker. Just learned about this guy and his theory in my Chem 107 philosophy class on Friday. I literally just read about this in my pre-Socratics book for class in 10 minutes. WTF? Based on the Greek word atomus, which roughly translates to inseparable. Pretty shocked when I found this out too. I wonder how many things the ancient Greeks thought of that we have forgotten or that got burnt down in Alexander's library. I learned in chemistry class in high school. Epicurus also theorized them. I think Indian ancient theory of atoms is older. https://en. Wikipedia, org/wiki/Vaisheshika. He lived to be 110, 90 damn. The Vedas were talking about base units of matter, https://en. Wikipedia, org/wiki/Vaisheshika #the_atomic_theory, around the same time. What about an Indian sage called Acharya Kanad who put forth the same idea in 600 BC? https://www. Ancient origins. Net/ancient technology/Indian sage who developed atomic theory 2600 years ago 001399. Every object of creation is made of atoms, paramua, which in turn connect with each other to form molecules, au. Atoms are eternal, and their combinations constitute the empirical material world. By Indian philosopher/scientist Kannada, possibly before Democritus or around the same time. https://en. M. Wikipedia, org/wiki/Kannada_, philosopher. Saw some graffiti out in a bathroom in rural Connecticut once that said "fuck Democrats." Must have been referring to this guy. It makes me sad just how little the posters in this sub seem to learn in school. Isn't it wrong to say that he only hypothesized their existence? He logically proved their existence with the whole cone slicing thing. https://udo, b/a60wx5ce4, t = 15. The thing is, Democritus had no evidence for this. There was zero reason to believe this theory over any other theory at the time. Similarly, precedents to germ theory were hypothesized back in ancient Rome, but they were also baseless. Just because these theories happen to be correct doesn't necessarily make them impressive. In fact, they didn't catch on earlier because they weren't compelling with the available evidence at the time, and required wild leaps of faith. This reminds me of that infinite monkey theorem. Democracy was already in practice for a few hundred years in Athens at this point. It would be neat if this were inspired by indivisible individual citizen voters in different arrangements collectively making up the state. I am in love with that facial expression. Atoms and the void. Early medieval Arabian philosophers were atomists too. It was 10-13th century. I was hoping that someone might point out that this idea is actually wrong. Atoms are made of quarks, which are expressions of interaction between quantum fields. The particle aspect is an illusion of perspective. There are no things at all, only energy, and vibrations within these fields. Odd-looking duck though. Up an atom. I just looked a French YouTube video explaining that his hypothesis is based that you could take any matter and split in half, then that half and split it in half until the last part would not be splittable anymore. And that last part precisely means atoms. How did he know? It blows my mind to think about how he may have come to those conclusions, like the mind process. Unaided by microscopes or other modern measuring and detection devices, he posited that theory about the nature of matter at a time when most people purportedly thought earth, air, water, fire were the elements that everything was comprised of. His observations, how he processed that information, and how he came to such conclusions juxtaposed to his contemporaries is so fascinating. Defiantly top 5 people from history I'd love to be able to talk to. Thanks Democritus for inventing atoms. Very cool. If he was vain we would call the basic unit of the universe Democritians, also the world's first good friend. Asking them what's the matter if they were upset. When you have 300 IQ but live in the Stone Age. Democritus. That proves it. Atoms are a liberal conceparcy. And thus, Legos were born.